Hare Krishna, my name is Anuttama, speaking to you from Washington, D.C., and I'm very, very, very pleased to have an opportunity and the honor of sharing a few words in appreciation and glorification of His Holiness Mukunda Maharaj on this very auspicious 80th birthday celebration, Vyasa Puja, holiday, etc. I know there's a lot of events going on. And first of all, I'm hoping at some point Mukunda Maharaj himself will be able to hear this. And with that in mind, I want to begin by just saying, happy birthday, Maharaj. I wish I was there with you to celebrate, but we're thinking about you this whole special season of events that I know are going on around your 80th birthday. And I want to begin by just acknowledging personally that I owe a great deal. I owe a great deal to His Holiness Mukunda Maharaj. He was one that actually first engaged me in any kind of communications work, and he really has been a wonderful example and an inspiration to me in many, many ways. He encouraged me by his example and really by his demonstrating a concern and a deep abiding care about ISKCON's reputation and the whole quality and culture of reaching out to other religious communities, other leaders, gatekeepers of society, to try to build relationships with them and to make friendships with them. He really, he's done phenomenal impact on me, and I'll talk about some of his personal contributions in a few minutes. But just a couple stories I'd like to share. Mukunda Maharaj came to Denver years ago when I was still there, so this was in the early 90s, I believe. And there was a big First Amendment convention in Denver, Colorado. And I thought, wow, I'm so fortunate because Mukunda Maharaj is coming for this event. We're a little isolated, kind of out there in the middle of the country. And I contacted him and said, can I come with you? And he said, sure. So we went to this event. I think it was 2 or 3 days. And long story short, he and I were in some committee that was talking about religious freedom. Later on, what we had drafted with others went to a second group, and they recrafted what was said and was presented in front of this plenty of about 300-400 people. And whatever Mukunda Maharaj and I had helped to put in the first group was completely eradicated. They took it out, they deleted it, and some big guy on stage is speaking with an NPR host, big TV personality, was heading the whole thing. And I leaned over to Maharaj and said, Maharaj, they took out what we put in. And he said, yeah, that's not right. Stand up and say something. I was like, what, me? I can't stand up. He said, stand up and say something. So I walked over to the microphone and I stood up to my dhoti, my tilak, and said that we'd been members of the first panel on this and we didn't agree with this and we thought it should be put back in. And then I sat down thinking I'd done what I was supposed to do. And then the leader of our whole kind of subsection that oversaw the crafting of this, he stood up and on the main stage and said, well, here's all the reasons I don't agree with what the gentleman has just presented. And I leaned over to Maharaj again, and he said, get up there. So I stood up again, inspired by him, ordered by him, and then I spoke out. And as things turned out, Judy Woodruff, I remember now, was the hostess, still on NPR, I believe, television. And they turned the whole thing around based on what Mukunda Maharaj had inspired me to do. So that's the kind of impact he had on my life. Later, when I started doing communications work directly under him, but was still based in Denver, I remember one time I had some problem with the meeting. I called him up, Maharaj, what do you think we should do? And he listened to me, and his response was a wonderful, wonderful example of teaching and leadership. He said, Anuttama, why don't you think about it for 20 minutes, come up with what you think are the 3 best ideas, and then call me back, and we'll discuss it. And through that process, by the time I called him back, it was very clear in my mind, okay, here's 3 options, but, option 2 is by far the best one. I explained that to him, and he said, yeah, that sounds good to me. So he really empowered me to learn how to make the proper decisions, always at the same time knowing he was there to give guidance, which I just thought was wonderful. Just a few minutes about Maharaj's personal contributions. They're so magnificent, really. Maharaj has just been a ground-breaking leader in ISKCON since day one. And I think back, I love to reread Leela Amrita from time to time, and Maharaj is such an important role he played, just to name a few things, helping get the 26th Second Avenue Temple with Srila Prabhupada, going to San Francisco and being one of the key people, if not the key person, behind the whole Mantra Rock event. and then going to London and meeting the Beatles and being the leader of that London temple for many, many years. And of course, starting the whole ISKCON communications effort. He really started, the public affairs office that he was running and pioneered for many, many years. And his writing and his publishing, I just went to my bookshelf, I pulled up a few. He had a lot to do with coming back. He was the main interview person, speaking with the Beatles, speaking with George Harrison in the Chant to Be Happy. He co-authored Divine Nature with Dhruta Karma Prabhu. And of course, one of the books that we all love so much, I probably read this at least 3 times, maybe 4 or 5 times, Miracle on 2nd Avenue, which is such an inspiring book. In those of you that were around in the ancient days, you also remember the Hare Krishna World, the newspaper that he was overseeing. Maharaj stood up in the mid-'80s, and there was some real problems with leadership, some corruption within the leadership. Maharaj stood up within the GBC and said, look, this isn't going to work.